Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Dublin Castle this morning. My name is Fayot McLaughlin. I'm the Director for Global Citizenship Education, amongst other things, at the Department of Foreign Affairs here in Dublin. And I was chair of the drafting committee for the declaration, which we will adopt tomorrow. And it's great to see so many familiar faces from that process, although you're all in 3 dimensions and you're much, much taller than you were when I saw you last. Ladies and gentlemen, our host this week, or over the next 2 days, and the chair of this Congress is Minister Colm Brophy, who has been Minister for Overseas Development and Diaspora since July of 2020. The Minister has a strong personal interest in global citizenship and the issues that we will discuss here over the next couple of days, and he was behind the development of Ireland's global citizenship education policy, which he launched at the end of last year. And I'm delighted to ask him to take the floor to open the Congress. Minister.
Good morning. And it's obviously been a long road, but I'm delighted to finally welcome you all to Dublin for this European Congress on Global Education. I believe it's only the second event of its type, 20 years after the Maastricht Declaration launched our common endeavour to build global education here in Europe. This event has been in gestation for 18 months, and it's more than a year since we in Ireland joined our friends in GE and co-chair Luxembourg in planning this conference and in drafting the declaration that we will adopt tomorrow. So I'm very pleased to welcome my friend, the Luxembourg Minister for Development, Cooperation and Humanitarian Affairs, Franz, in his role as co-chair of this process and of the Congress. Now, the preparation of this event has entailed numerous, policy exchanges and consultations. I believe 10 rounds of discussion on the draft declaration. Months of feedback, obviously, from civil society right across Europe and from our friends around the world. All of these roads have led us here today to Dublin and to the next day and a half, which we will reflect on the importance of global education in all its facets and variations. Now, this actually will be the final event of Ireland's Council of European Presidency calendar, and I'm very pleased to welcome the Deputy General Secretary of the Council of Europe, Bjørn. Bjørn has visited Ireland, I know, at least 3 times during the course of our 6-month term, and we are grateful to him for travelling again from Strasbourg to join us. I believe it reflects the priority he and the Council afford to education at all levels in promoting democracy, human rights and the rule of law. And we are also joined by distinguished guests from the worlds of education development, cooperation and all strands of civil society. Particularly like, obviously, to welcome the UN Secretary General's Special Advisor for Transforming Education, who will address us this morning, and the Deputy Minister for Education from Sierra Leone, who's visiting Ireland for the first time. You are very welcome. My thanks to all my ministerial colleagues and to those senior officials who have come from right across Europe. To the representative of the United Nations, the European Commission, to the OECD, to the UNESCO, and to the Portuguese language community. There are delegates, I believe, from at least 33 countries, including some who've literally travelled from the far side of the world to be with us. And thank you all very much. And of course, to acknowledge all our friends from right across the community here in Ireland. I think the fact that we have such a broad attendance at this event is actually testament to the importance of global education and to the need for a united effort to broaden the civic conversation that necessarily entails. The timing of this event and this initiative is critical, as we are at a pivotal moment on the planet. As a global community, as a species, we face the climate crisis, we face the loss of biodiversity, global hunger is growing, and conflict continues to erupt. Here in Europe, Russian aggression has caused massive loss of life in Ukraine, and I believe threatens the institutional architecture across our wider continent. It really does remind us of the fragility of life and also of the assumptions and the social and political connective tissue that underlie so many of our relationships. As societies, as governments, We're challenged constantly, I believe, by misinformation, by manipulation of media, including particularly social media, for political ends. For those of us in government, it strikes me that it has the possibility, and it's never been more important, to reflect on therefore how we must communicate in public life. More broadly though, for those of us working in global citizenship education, it's important to take a long, hard look at how we encourage the public to reflect on and critically engage with the existential issues that we all face and the policies that frame, therefore, much of our response. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's important at this point to recognise that it's been a difficult few years for all of us. The COVID pandemic took many lives. It stunted livelihoods, deprived people of opportunities. We are all very aware of the toll in our societies here in Europe and across the world. And very rarely, though, is there anything good that you can say that came out of the COVID. But one thing in all of the misery that was there, that it has created, I believe, one small opportunity. My sense is, particularly here in Ireland at least, that there is a greater understanding now of the extent to which we are all individually and collectively connected. As we followed the ebb and flow of the pandemic and the way it was managed from different parts of the world, whether that be New Zealand or Brazil, whether it be China or elsewhere in Europe, we all followed the work also of the World Health Organization and the race to develop vaccines against COVID. Many of us, either personally or professionally, were involved in efforts to ensure the continuity of education, particularly for children and young children. But my point is that the pandemic was one of the few instances in which the entire world was captured and participated in a single story. And as a consequence of that, COVID perhaps helped to create more than most a tangible sense of a single global community. More than anything before it, it created that sense of that single global community. So the question therefore I pose is, how do we harness the opportunity that has arisen? How do we build on the awareness of the interconnections that exist within our societies? And for me, that means reflecting on the audience for global education and the way we reach that audience. It means embracing technological developments that accelerated during the pandemic in education and in linking people and in linking communities. It also means, though, building a new model of partnership for global education right across Europe. I would like to think that this model, I'd like to think of it as a sort of a constellation that includes citizens on the street, as well as those debating policy at the UN or the OECD. A constellation that includes educators, but also the European Union or the Council of Europe, that includes civil society and also governments and community organisations. The point of this is that in an actual constellation, you have a series of individual stars or points of light, each of which with its own identity and characteristics. But together they form something larger, something that would not be complete if any of them wasn't present. So each of us, whether we are a youth representative, a government minister, or a community volunteer, has a real part to play. Together, we can build a broad coalition that encourages all of our citizens to critically reflect on the state of the world and on how we, can make a difference at an individual and at a collective level. And as I said at the outset, we're fortunate to be joined by a wide range of experienced and insightful participants here today. Our panels will focus on quality, on broadening our audience, and on innovation. And I believe we can look forward to some very interesting debate throughout the day. Tomorrow, we'll have a dialogue between ministers and the heads of delegation and civil society representatives, during which we can reflect on the role each of us will have on delivering our joint vision for global education in Europe. Ministers and heads of delegation will have an opportunity to provide reflections from a governmental perspective. And then finally, we hopefully will adopt the Dublin Declaration. So, in conclusion, I would like obviously to thank all of you who have participated in the declaration process. I know it was an extensive and detailed, and it has, which I think, succeeded in bringing together the priorities and aspirations of different groups working in global education right across Europe. So thank you very much, and welcome to Dublin.
Ladies and gentlemen, as the Minister mentioned, our co-chairs for this process and for the Congress are our friends from Luxembourg, and specifically today Minister Franz Fayot, who is the Minister for Development, Cooperation and Humanitarian Affairs, and Minister for the Economy. Minister Fayot has held these portfolios since early 2020. He was previously a barrister at law. We're delighted that the Minister was able to join us here in Dublin today, and I ask you to join us in welcoming him. Please, Minister.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, first of all, Minister Brophy, for allowing Luxembourg to co-chair this event. Someone was referring outside to arm wrestling to actually be able to host this. I don't think it was really arm wrestling. I think we gave this very graciously to Ireland, and I think the perfect organization of this event shows that this was definitely the right decision. And again, thank you for allowing us to co-chair this process, and thank you also for the very good collaboration over the past 18 months during the whole process and in getting to this very ambitious and very progressive text of the Dublin Declaration. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for all of you for being here with us today. Minister Brophy said it, in a world that is increasingly divided, and also at a time where we are facing problems as humans that we can only be tackled together, this Congress represents a great moment of hope. A hope to contribute to a better tomorrow, because we all know that every positive change starts with education. And it is certainly a moment of relief too for those who have been working on this text for almost a year. So congratulations to all for your endurance and your patience. But it is also, I think, a great moment of unity. And it is good, as I said, to see that we can come together over something as fundamental as common values in education that address the challenges of our times. Social justice, human rights, care for the planet in the interest of present and also future generations, and maybe above all, solidarity among humans. You only have to look at the very many stakeholders who have contributed to the declaration and the diversity of actors present today to see that some of the precepts of global education were already applied throughout the creation of this new declaration. In a globalized and climate change influenced world, but primarily also a world that is riddled by the many crises that Minister Brophy has described in his speech, education is the only way to empower children and young citizens to consciously develop and proactively contribute to society. This requires an inherently transformative education which prepares children and young people to live in a more complex and global world, even though a very different globalization from the one that we have known even 1 year ago. Not only to live in it, but also to shape it as critical, enlightened participants to the democratic conversation. Young people will be facing challenges, global challenges in the future, some probably unknown today. We need to empower them so that they are confident to actively use their creativity and critical mind, be open to changes of perspective, and be self-aware of being global citizens. It is about being prepared to face the reality around us, but also to grow in awareness of the impact of our actions and lifestyles beyond our immediate surroundings. Through this new declaration, we lay the foundations for defining common objectives for our education policies. We have the tools to optimize the chances of building a system that empowers young and old alike to question their surroundings and to look critically at it, to understand it, and to have the courage to take action. It will help them become agents of change for a more sustainable, more just, and better tomorrow. I am very happy and very proud to be with you here today to associate Luxembourg with this declaration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. As Minister Brophy mentioned, this event is the final formal event of Ireland's presidency of the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe. And we're delighted to welcome the Deputy Secretary General of the Council of Europe, Bjørn Berge, to Dublin today. Mr. Berge is a highly experienced diplomat. He's had a key role within the Council since his appointment last year to the Deputy Secretary General position, and in fact before that as well in his previous role as Director General and Secretary to the Committee of Ministers. And I'm delighted to invite him to address us this morning.
A very good morning to you all, and it's really great to be back in beautiful and sunny Dublin. And congratulations also on the 20th anniversary on the Maastricht Declaration, and the best of luck also in adopting now this very new and important declaration, the Dublin Declaration. Minister for Overseas Development and Diaspora of Ireland, ministers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. In democratic countries, education serves 4 key functions. It provides us with a broad, advanced knowledge base. It equips us to compete in the job market. It furthers our personal development, and it prepares us to be active citizens playing our part in civic and national life. The very same principles underpin the Council of Europe's approach to ensuring inclusive, quality education in the interest of learners and societies in Europe and throughout the world. Yes, our organization is European, but aspiration for good, effective, and democratic education spans far wider than the borders of our continent. Everyone wants and deserves a chance in life. So we want to share our best practices, experience, and expertise with other countries and organizations that have the same aspirations for their citizens. That sentiment is core to both the work of our North-South Center in Lisbon and the Global Education Network Europe, which has done so much to develop and promote the concept and practice of global education for over 20 years. Indeed, it is central to our organization's broader outlook. Education, as a matter of fact, is one of the 12 key objectives outlined in the Council of Europe's new strategic framework. And of course, it's the 4th of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Playing our role in delivering these objectives helps us to meet others in turn, fighting inequalities, including economic inequality, combating discrimination, and supporting the work and diversity of civil society, which plays a key role in promoting global education. So our aims and targets are varied and ambitious, but actually, how do we go about achieving them? How should we help governments and others to deliver that quality, competence-based education that contributes to a culture of democracy and pluralism? And how do we make sure knowledge and understanding flourish alongside democratic values, and that education helps advance human rights, democratic citizenship, and sustainable development? Let me try to give an answer to these 2 questions. First, over the years, we have put in place a range of standards to guide authorities in their actions. starting with the European Cultural Convention of 1954, which brought about cooperation in language learning, history teaching, and student mobility. Since then, we have been also initiating a number of new instruments. In recent years, these have included our Charter for Education for Democratic Citizenship and Human Rights, a real catalyst, I would say, for government action. Encouraging authorities to use education as a tool to broaden young people's awareness of their role in society and the fundamental rights that belong to every individual by law and which they in turn should respect. And how to support it? We have adopted a reference framework of competences for democratic culture. This is now our primary tool for ensuring democratic, inclusive, and global education. And it is divided into 4 clusters: values, attitudes, skills and knowledge, and critical understanding. These again contain a total of 20 competences. Competences that allow learners to have a better insight into democracy, how it functions, how they benefit from it, how it helps to confront the problems of our societies, and how they can defend it from attack. But this alone is not enough. And that brings me to my second point. Global education must provide both a historical perspective and move with the times. The Council of Europe, as far as I know, is the only international organization that includes a history education program, ensuring that people have knowledge and critical insight into European and world history, and meeting our need to put the past into a current context and analyze events from a balanced perspective. At the heart of this model is the concept of multi-perspectivity, where students learn to differentiate memories, interpretations, and perspectives, to tell fact from fiction, and to detect propaganda, and to bring people together in the confidence and trust that come with mutual understanding. And finally, my third point. We are also taking new and recent challenges head on. For example, in response to increased migration into Europe, we have developed a European qualifications passport for refugees. This supports the recognition of qualifications from other countries, so that migrants can continue their education, find work, and integrate more easily in their new country. And it is being applied around the world through the important work of our friends in UNESCO. More recently still, our member states adopted a recommendation on digital citizenship education. This is our direct response to an ever-growing role of digitalization in the lives and learning of children and young people. It also builds democratic citizenship and democratic resilience, and it does so in the very particular context of the digital environment, an environment where disinformation and hate speech way too often abound, and where it is vital that young people have the skills to spot and process what is untrue, unfair, unsafe. In this rapidly evolving context, we must always look for new ways to ensure effective global education, with learning that is fit for the modern age. Finally, let me end by highlighting that right now the Council of Europe is at work on a new education strategy. The aim of this strategy is to strengthen education's role in democratic renewal and trust in democracy, and at the same time provide for a more developed, human rights-based approach to the digital transformation of education. In doing so, I believe we will help meet a range of the UN Sustainable Development Goals on quality education, on citizenship education, and on their central transformative promise to leave no one behind. Dear friends, this conference will no doubt address many of these issues. So I want to end by congratulating the Global Education Network Europe for organizing it, the Irish authorities for hosting it, and all of you for attending it. It is a valuable opportunity to commit to the Dublin Declaration on Global Education to 2050. 20 years, as I said, after the Maastricht Declaration, the first strategy of its kind, which did so much to improve and increase global education. This new, ambitious but clear-sighted text commits its signatories to the long haul, and that is vitally important, because our commitment to human rights, democracy, and the rule of law through education and every other means should never be a short-term project, not in Europe and not anywhere else. Of course, it will require hard work and commitment, as often is the case, but I believe we together are ready for this challenge. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Deputy Secretary General. Ladies and gentlemen, we're very lucky to have amongst us today Minister Mamusu Massaquoi from Sierra Leone. Minister Massaquoi has been Deputy Minister of Education since January of this year, I think. She's an educationalist by background. She has postgraduate degrees in nutrition and education, including from King's College in London. And she has an extraordinary 28 years of experience in education and nutrition. We're delighted that she agreed to travel to Dublin today, and I'd ask you to give her a very warm welcome. Minister.
Good morning, everyone. His Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I bring you warm greetings from Sierra Leone. It's a small country located in West Africa, a country that has survived civil war, that has survived the Ebola endemic, and has dealt with the COVID-19, and of course now dealing with the global food crisis. I want to start my opening remarks this morning by giving you an overview of the context of education in Sierra Leone, some of the progresses we have made despite the challenges, and including the impact of COVID-19 on our educational system. When our President, His Excellency President Julius Maada Bio, disclosed his intention to introduce the Free Quality Education Initiative in Sierra Leone almost 5 years ago, many doubted the possibility of his dreams. Even the global media expressed skepticism over his vision. Of over 4 years now, the Free Quality Education Initiative is not just a remarkable achievement, but also a global example of education transformation at a steady scale. For Sierra Leone to have achieved this within a relatively short time, it has taken belief in its initiative, strong determination, and unprecedented allocation of resources to the education sector. Since 2019, our government in Sierra Leone has allocated about 22% of its annual budget to the education sector. The government has eradicated all barriers that had inhibited access to education. Since 2018, our government has paid tuition and public exam fees, and provision of teaching and learning materials to all pupils in public schools. COVID-19, of course, caused disruption in the education of an entire generation of our children. The COVID-19 pandemic restrictions made millions of school children across the globe to stay home at the same time get home teaching. It was tedious and characterized by anxiety. Today, 2 years on, even after the outbreak, many schools are still struggling to return to normalcy, worsening learning losses as well as social isolation. Our schools provide both learning and serve as safety net for our children. Hence, being cut off from school, teachers, and friends can be difficult for any child. Children from deprived families, children who live in rural areas, and girls suffered worst during the pandemic. These children are more likely to be food insecure, disproportionately affected by digital divide, and are likely to experience the greatest learning loss. While the magnitude of COVID-19 crisis is unprecedented, Sierra Leone, having gone through the Ebola endemic, knew the setbacks and caused restrictions on economic activities and loss of educational opportunities on citizens, especially on the young generation. One good example was an emergency radio program which the Ministry of Education and the Teaching Service Commission allowed children to continuously use from home. The program provided daily programs from primary and secondary curriculum in core academic subjects, including maths, English language, life skills, and social studies, business management, and integrated science. This radio program started in 2020, and it is now widely used across the country, even during school times. All these mitigating measures were crucial in preventing learning losses in comparison to the Ebola period. Despite these measures, COVID-19 greatly impacted on educational outcomes. Schools were closed between March to September, though it was only for 6 months, which was remarkable. And through optional teaching methods were adopted. The radio teaching program, most children could either not access the program as a result of the unavailability of radio sets at home or the limitation of the radio frequency transmitting the teaching programs in their localities. School closures also created a convenient period, I put convenient in quotes, for schoolgirls to get pregnant. It is estimated that about 3,000 schoolgirls became pregnant during the COVID period in Sierra Leone. This, however, in comparison to the Ebola period, where we had 25,000 girls who became pregnant during school closure. The drop is attributed to the fact that the ministry mounted a robust zero pregnancy campaign across the country, targeting school-going adolescent girls. There has been moves by the government of Sierra Leone through the Ministry of Education to come up with strategies for rapid learning recovery, overturning the ban on pregnant schoolgirls continuing in school, and subsequently introduction of the radical inclusion policy has not only created an opportunity for pregnant girls to continue in school and eventually complete school, but it has also meant that the dropout rate attributed to pregnancy has been reduced considerably. The accelerated learning centers, which were established by the ministry, have also provided a space for girls who have dropped out of school as a result of different factors occasioned by COVID-19 to have remedial classes that prepare them for reintroduction or reintegration into formal school again. Over 6,000 girls have been reintegrated currently through this program in Sierra Leone. Education should provide an intentional platform for our young learners to discover, engage in discourse, as well as contribute to issues affecting them locally and globally. Children and young people have a role to play in addressing these issues: climate change, gender equality, peace, and human rights. These global issues are therefore for engagement is significant, and their voice a must to be heard. Hence the establishment of our young groups across all districts. We have a very active youth group, and there are representatives from districts making engagements with the Ministry of Education. Recently, we took a youth to the UNGA in New York, and at that UNGA, we had a youth telling every government representative to ensure that youths are having representations on panels to make decisions relating to young people. Climate change, gender equality, peace, and human rights can be integrated into curriculum and subject syllabus in schools as a cross-cutting issue. In our new education sector plan in Sierra Leone, the vision of our government's education program is to ensure that all learners in Sierra Leone will have equal opportunity to access quality, basic, technical, vocational, and higher education that enables them to participate in public life, contribute to the national and global economy, and fulfill their potential. The mission is to facilitate and support the cognitive, psychosocial, and physical development of all children and to ensure safe learning environments that are inclusive and well-resourced, as well as to promote access to equality in tertiary and vocational education through appropriate policies and legislations, as well as skills development for an advancement of education in Sierra Leone. Our ministry has already begun and has developed curriculum for basic and senior secondary education and has built them on creativity, comprehension, computational skills, constructive writing, and civic education. Education, however, has limitations. For its transformational benefits to materialize, a number of challenges must be addressed. Two of the biggest or largest challenges currently in Sierra Leone is the lack of teachers and ineffective pedagogies that are being employed. The progress in school enrollment, having had free education, has not been matched with the number of teachers. The global community is already far behind these ambitious targets and cannot even meet the current demand. The shortage results in school overcrowding, poor delivery of instructions, and poorer educational outcomes. The lack of trained and qualified teachers is diminishing the impacts of education systems and limits their future growth and potential. This is crucial for developing countries like ours that is faced with limited education budgets to have effective pedagogies in schools to ensure students are receiving applicable knowledge and skills. Additionally, the distance from home to school, hunger, and poor nutrition are additional challenges. To strengthen national capacities to improve teacher policy formulation, implementation, and assessment of teachers is a requirement. We need to develop capacities of national teacher training institutions to develop quality training using blended strategies, including the current technologies. We need to support the capacity development of head teachers and school principals for effective pedagogy leadership and quality learning outcomes. We need to support quality policies for teaching and learning environments. We need to support the development and harmonization of national and regional qualification frameworks for educational personnel. At our recent Transformation Summit, I want to just zoom in and talk about some of the key messages that emerged from the Transformation Summit. One was clearly the equality and inclusion quality and as relevant as much as it should. Often slow and unforeseen, this crisis is having a devastating impact on the future of children and youth worldwide. The Transformation Summit was a key initiative of the Common Agenda launched by the United Nations Secretary General. The Assembly was convened by the Secretary General as a view to evaluate education and to make it a top global political agenda and mobilize actions, ambitions, and make solidarity solutions to recover the pandemic-related learning losses and sow the seeds to transform education in a rapidly changing world. Our ministry in Sierra Leone has already formulated some of those policies and regulations that seek to enhance education transformation, and this includes the early child development policies, actively improving and expanding on the school feeding, and developed a policy, the radical inclusion, the school catchment area policy. These are all contributing invariably to improving the education system, making it responsive to the 21st century. And on that note, I want to end by congratulating all my colleagues who have contributed to making this event today, and also thank the Dublin government for hosting us, particularly me. I lived in the UK for years, and this is my first time coming down to Ireland. So I am pleased to be here. So together, it is a collective effort. We can make these challenges a progress and make history a success. Thank you once more.
Thank you very much, Minister. We now have a brief video message from Stefania Giannini, who is the Assistant Director General for Education at UNESCO. Stefania wasn't able to join us today, but she wanted to offer her best wishes and some reflections on this event. So,
Excellencies, dear partners, dear friends, a year has passed already since the launch of the process to create a new European Declaration on Global Education to 2050. A year during which the war in Ukraine marks the greatest threat to peace and security in Europe since the Second World War, making collaboration around this declaration all the more significant. After intense consultations to which UNESCO has contributed, we are gathered to mark your achievement, which comes to an inopportune moment. The Transforming Education Summit, all of you know, in September, was a turning point in history of education, generating political mobilization at the highest level. The UN Summit resulted in commitments now from some 35 countries to ensure education is fit for the future, and so the launch of a youth-led global movement. We are particularly proud of this because the future of education has to be shaped with young people at the core, at the helm of it. UNESCO prepared the ground for the summit not only in its role as test secretariat, but through major world conferences over the past year and a half, including on education for sustainable development. The common thread running through them is the recognition of the right to relevant education of good quality throughout life. Building on the Futures of Education report, the outcome vision statement of this summit, the Secretary General vision paper, calls for rethinking the purpose and content of education in this century and transforming education accordingly. For UNESCO, this means what? This means ensuring education inspires and empowers people of all ages to flourish and to effectively participate in decision-making processes. Education must also help learners take actions and advance peace. Education is very much about human rights. It's very much about sustainable development and global citizenship. As global threats now to peace and human rights are more than ever interconnected, peace cannot be the creed. It must be nurtured through the dignity, through the rights, and the capacity of every man and woman. This is actually the role of education in our century. The adoption of the European Declaration sends a strong message that the European region adheres to this vision. Because a safe and sustainable future can only be shaped by critically informed global citizenship. As the declaration builds on discussions around SDG 4, it also demonstrates the coherence between global instruments and national aspirations. This is all the more encouraging in light of our work, the work we are doing in the next few months to revise another milestone, the UNESCO 1974 recommendation concerning education for international understanding, cooperation and peace, and education for human rights and fundamental freedoms, a long title which summarizes now 50 years ago these important pioneeristic principles. In this sense, the adoption of the declaration is only a beginning, and we are really at UNESCO looking forward to seeing it inspire and inform change. And I really thank you, all of you. I thank Ireland for hosting this milestone meeting, co-chair with Luxembourg. Thank you very much.
thank you. And now I would like to invite Annette Scheunpflug to take the floor. Annette is, of course, Professor of Educational Foundations and Global Learning at the University of Bamberg in Germany. She's a member of the German Academy of Sciences, but of course, to all of us, she is the chair of GE. Please, Annette.
Esteemed ministers and deputy ministers, your excellencies, esteemed representatives of ministries and agencies, esteemed representatives of international organizations, of youth and civil organizations, and of local and regional governments, dear colleagues from academia, and dear global critical friends. What a joy to be together today and to reflect on global learning. Our sincere thanks to our Irish host, dear Minister Brophy, and to our co-chair from Luxembourg, dear Minister Fayot. On behalf of GE, the convening organization of this Congress and the facilitator of the whole declaration process, the warmest of welcomes to the beautiful city of Dublin. Many of you have been involved over the past 18 months in the development of the new declaration on global learning we developed together. You are very welcome, and we thank you and appreciate the work of all of you that brought us to this day. What brings us together is our concern that we want to ensure quality global education for all people in Europe. Education that opens people's eyes to the causes of injustice, local and global, and encourage us to get involved to learn how to change, and that is global education. Sustainability can only be reached by an understanding of fair and social just global commitments. To understand that we are not only related to our families, to our neighbors, and to our nations, however, that we are globally interconnected humans in our self-understanding, needs a form of social thinking which requires learning and enlightenment. The climate crisis and other global challenges such as social injustice and poverty can only be solved with people having understood this interconnectivity. This urgent instrumentality of global learning is crucial in order to achieve the sustainable development goals. But beyond, global learning has its dignity in every learning process of every single person, encountering the fearless self-efficacy of a global worldview, the enrichment by a change of perspective, the support of having learned to deal with contingency, and the intellectual and emotional challenge to master the complexities of the world. In 2001, when 6 ministries founded GE, and in the following year when the Maastricht Declaration was launched, the urgency of global learning was already evident. Since this time, the reflection of the particular global dimension of reaching sustainability, the awareness of racism and North-South paternalism, and the understanding of the structures of othering and social exclusion have become much more elaborated. On the one hand side, it is shameful that even after 20 years of involvement in this field, a commitment is still required. On the other hand, and this side predominates, it is amazing what has been achieved during this time. Global learning is no longer a niche of some NGOs, but has got mainstreamed in curricula, in funding procedures, and in national and regional policies. Global learning is more and more branching out into non-formal and informal learning sectors, such as youth organizations, and it becomes a common global learning task in overcoming paternalism and supremacy all over the world. GE, the Global Education Network Europe, now has grown to include over 50 ministries, agencies, and other national bodies from over 25 countries in Europe. Last year, GE brought together over 250 policymakers and stakeholders from across Europe to launch a process leading to the development of a new European Declaration on Global Education to 2050. The new Dublin Declaration will provide commitments regarding the role of education in contributing to international solidarity, human rights, global social justice, sustainability, and peace. With this Congress and Declaration, we are here to move global education up the ladder of priority. And thank you for your presence here, as we believe that this is crucial for the long-term future of people and of the planet. When in June we embarked on leading this journey towards a new declaration, we were intent on ensuring that while led by policymakers and signed off by governments, it would have strong engagement with stakeholders throughout. We are very grateful for stakeholders from youth organizations, civil society, local and regional governments, academia, and global critical friends who, together with international organizations, have joined us in this journey to create a new declaration. Global education aims to end all forms of colonialism in thinking and in doing. We are very conscious that as we gather here today, we are dealing with the immediate effects of a colonial war waged against our neighbors in Ukraine. Therefore, we want to particularly welcome our colleagues from Ukraine today being present here, and we thank our partner from European Educational Research Association for facilitating this invitation. Yes. GE is a fairly formal network of formal structures. We recognize that all learning, including policy learning, is of course most fruitful when it's built on strong relationships. In GE, we network people as well as structures. So we are particularly delighted that along with those well-versed and experienced in global education, we have people here today from a variety of sectors not yet as engaged in global education as that might become. We see this Congress as a space for networking and for acclaiming the new declaration, exploring important themes and topics in global education, giving space for sector-specific and intersectoral engagement, and for moving from good to great and from many to all. The German poet Johann Wolfgang von Goethe once said, "The one who does not see the world in his friends does not deserve that the world learns about him." So, during this Congress, explore the world in the colleagues and friends you meet here, and find friends in the world of global learning. Welcome on behalf of GE. We hope that you will make new connections that will be fruitful for the time to come. Thank you.